Hello, I'm Stephen Mayeux, and you're watching The Best JS. In this video series, we're using Learn You Node from Node School to learn the basics of NodeJS. And with NodeJS, you can do a lot of great stuff, including making full-stack applications. Okay, so we are on lucky number 13, challenge 13, which is the last challenge for this program. And, well, let's get down into it. Haha, now I clicked into it and I didn't make the same mistake as I did 12 times before. So anyway, this is a behemoth. This is a lot of work. So pause the video right now, read the instructions, read the hints, and when you think that you know like what's going on, you want to give it a shot, then jump into your text editor. If you want to watch me code along, that's great. But just take a moment and read over the challenge and the hints first, and then come back to the video. Okay, great. So we have our work cut out for us. And to make our job a little bit easier, I've gone ahead and created a file called 13 API server. Let's just to make our job easier, we're going to require in a couple of different modules from NPM and some core Node modules because we're doing like date and time objects. I'm not going to use vanilla JavaScript for that. I'm going to require in moment, and then we need to require also HTTP because we're going to make a server, and then we're going to require in another Node native package called URL. And that's going to help us parse the URL sent to our server. So anyway, let's require that in. So const HTTP require HTTP, and then let's do URL. And we don't need to do anything for this. This is a native module. It comes with Node. And previously, in another video, we installed Moment, which is a helper library for date and time objects. So it's super helpful for us. Okay, awesome. We need to get the port from the command line argument. So let's do that. Const port process.argv, and it's the index 2. We're going to create a server, const server equals create server. There's going to be a request and a response object, or argument rather, in that callback function. We're going to do all of our stuff in here, and then we're going to make the server listen on the port provided to us. Okay, great. So first thing that I want to do is direct your attention to this module right here, URL. And that has a special method called parse. We give it a URL, it parses it, and it gives us an object with some different properties. So I'm going to just show you what that looks like right now. So URL.parse, and I'm going to give it the URL given to us from our request. So that's available to us on the request object, request.url. And I'm just going to give it a second argument called true. If you want to go to nodejs.org, you can go to the documentation and read about URL parse. It's a small a very small API compared to some of the other ones, but we're just going to include this. It defaults to false, and this is just going to give us some extra properties that we want. So anyway, let's save that. Let's go to our terminal. Let's run Learn You Node, run the API server. Whoops, we are missing something. Create server. Let's see, create server is not defined. Whoops, I should have put an HTTP there. That was stupid. All right, let's try that one more time. All right, cool. So you can see right here that URL.parse, it returns an object to us. So we give it a URL, and then we make this argument true. It defaults to false. You can read about this in the documentation. But essentially, it gives us an object with some different properties that are of interest to us. Particularly, I am interested in the path name and also this query. So the path name is a string, and the query is an object as well with a property of ISO. Okay, and that ISO, it comes from the URL parameter with an ISO data type. Okay, so anyway, we're going to use that, and we know that URL.parse with these arguments right here. We know that this is going to return an object to us. So I'm going to use a bit of ES6 destructuring to just pull off. I just want to create a variable called query and path name, and because query and path name are the name of the variables I want to create, and there's some matching property names in our object, I can use some ES6 destructuring to make that job a little bit easier. So I'm going to say const, give it a couple of curly braces, and path name, and also query. All right, so now I have just created two new variables, one called path name and one called query, and I wrapped them in curly braces, and the value of path name and query is going to equal the value of the path name property of the object and the query property of the object. And so that's just a bit of shorthand to make it work for us. Okay, and we're also going to respond with some JSON. So I think by default it's going to respond with just plain text. So we need to tell the response to write ahead. Okay, in our header we're going to give a server response code of 200, and then we're going to give it an object with a property of content type and a value of application/JSON. And make sure that you wrap the property and the value in quotations right there. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to do a check just to see what path our users are visiting. So if the path name, if that is equal, and I got to go back to the instructions right here. So if it is, where is it? Yes, if it is parse time, we're going to respond with a JSON object with hour, minute, and second. So if the path name is API/parse time, okay, then we are going to respond. So let's say return, so that we can leave the callback function immediately. Return response end. Okay, and we're going to respond with some JSON. So this is going to look a little weird, but just bear with me for a second. So we're going to write JSON.stringify. Okay, and this is just plain like vanilla JavaScript. This is nothing like too crazy right here. Essentially, we give JSON.stringify an object, and it makes the entire object into a string, which it looks like a string, but it's like it's a JSON object. Anyway, in order to make it work, we're just going to use this JSON.stringify in order to serve up our JSON that we want. So we're just going to give it an object. So here's the object, and with the curly braces, and that goes into JSON.stringify. And if we go back, we need an object or a JSON object with three properties: hour, minute, and second. So hour is the first one. Okay, so we're going to give it moment, and we're going to give it that ISO property. So query.iso. If we go back down here, remember this is our query object. Okay, and .iso. That gives us the string of the ISO time object. So query.iso, and then I'm just going to get the hour from it. Okay, we're going to convert that ISO object into an hour, and we're going to do the same thing for minute. So moment query.iso for minutes. And by the way, this is all in the moment.js documentation, so you can read about it later if you want to, but we're just going to fly through this. Moment query.iso .second. Okay, great. So this was one of the possibilities, one of the API endpoints. There was another one up here. we could also have API/Unix time. So let's take care of the endpoint for that one. So if the path name, if that is equal to API Unix time, okay, we're going to respond with the JSON object called Unix time, and we're going to give it the Unix number right there, an integer. Okay, so let's return. Okay, and again with JSON.stringify. Okay, and JSON.stringify, it takes an object that we want to make into a JSON object. That's going to have one property, Unix time, and we're going to call moment query.iso. Then we're going to call format on it. We're going to give that format a string, and we're going to give it a lowercase x. And so essentially, we're creating a new date-time object with the ISO string given to us in our URL parameter. And then we're telling moment to format it in just Unix time, so the number of milliseconds. And we're giving it a lowercase x because that's what the documentation is telling me to use. So I'm not like a computer genius. I'm not just guessing right here. But if you go to the documentation, here is moments documentation right here. All of this is in here for you, and this is where I'm getting it. So I just clicked on format, and I believe all the way at the bottom right here, yep, this is exactly what we want. The Unix millisecond timestamp, it is a lowercase x, and that's what we get. That's what we want. So that's where I am getting that. Now finally, if we get a request that's not at either of these endpoints, we should respond with another type of response. So let's update the header, response right head. Or how about, yeah, that's fine, response right head. We'll do a 404. And we'll also send some JSON content type application/JSON. And by the way, we wrote it up here, but we gave it a SAS code of 200, which is okay. And if we did get an appropriate path name, then we're returning. So that means it's going to exit the function, and this will never run. But in the case that we don't get this API endpoint or that one, then we're just going to rewrite the head to be a 404 and still serve up JSON. So finally, response.end. Okay, let's give it JSON.stringify. We'll give it another JSON object. All right, and we'll give it two properties. We'll say success, false, and then we'll give it a message property, and we'll use some string templates. So $path name, oops, is not a valid endpoint. Okay, let's save that. All right, awesome. So we required in our modules, got our port, and our server's listening on that port. We are getting a couple of properties from the URL module. We're writing a server code 200 and serving up JSON in our response. And if it is this API endpoint, we're going to respond with this JSON. If it's with Unix, we're going to respond with that JSON. And if it's neither of those, we're going to respond with a 404, and we're going to say, hey, we couldn't find this endpoint. It doesn't exist. Okay, so let's just go to the terminal. Let's run it. Learn you node verify 13, and hopefully, oops, something didn't work. Ah, yes, I forgot. Okay, so moment right here, it's gonna give you the Unix milliseconds time, but it's going to return it as a string, and we need to return it as a number. I totally forgot about that, but that's easy. You can just put like a plus right here, and that would make it into a number. I believe, or you can just wrap the whole thing in a number function like that, and then if we run it again, okay, there we go. That is perfect, and everything works. You can take a look at the official solution if you want to. There it is. All right, awesome. So congratulations, we have finished the Learn You Node modules. This is what is recommended that you do for Free Code Camp. If we go back to the Free Code Camp website, and if we go to the backend certificate, NodeJS and Express, and if you have completed these 13 challenges with me, well, guess what? You can check off this one, and also this one. So we have finished all 3 of these sort of challenges for the Node.js and Express.js portion of the backend certificate. And anyway, this is like really difficult, to learn. And while Free Code Camp is like really awesome community, I love it. This is one area that I thought they could use some improvement. So that's why I offered these videos. All right, so one kind of note about this. And you might be worried, like, oh my God, developing in Node.js, it's really, really difficult. But actually, it's not. So in the next video, I'm just going to wrap up the project, wrap up this series. I'm going to give you a few nuggets of wisdom, and then if you need any help, I'm going to give you some more resources for that. Okay, so we'll stop right here. In the next video, we'll just wrap up and conclude. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye. Boop.